Welcome to your new Joe Verde sales training program, How to Double Your Income Selling Cars in Today's Market. In this series, you will learn Joe's personal formula for success selling cars. He will show you how to improve your selling skill and increase your productivity to get the competitive edge in today's market. If you're serious about selling more cars, this information is the foundation you need for your career in sales. So sit back and get ready to turn pro. It's time to learn how to double your income in today's market.
Hi, I'm Joe Verde. Welcome to Phase 1 of your three-phase training program. And congratulations for taking the time to develop your skills. Now, the title of this program is called How to Double Your Income Selling Cars in Today's Market. And I know for a lot of people that may sound like a highball, but what if it wasn't a highball? What if I really could show you how to raise your sales 20%, 50%, 100%? What if I could show you how to raise your gross, make your customers happier? What if I could show you how to go home sooner and have more fun? Well, that's what this class is about. And before we get started in the program, first let's talk about selling cars. Let's talk about the training that most of us got. In fact, let me tell you about how I got in the car business and the training that I had, and it'll kind of fill you in on my background as well. Now, I never intended to be a salesperson in the car business. I grew up on a farm in Texas, and if you've been to one of my classes, we've talked about this in class or maybe some of the other tapes. But I lived in a real small town, about 900 people, and we kind of kid around about the only way you can get out of a town like that is to join the Army or join one of the services. So all of us, as soon as we turned 18, joined the service. And for the next 7 years, I was a helicopter mechanic. Now, I didn't like plowing fields. That's why I went in the Army. I didn't like being a helicopter mechanic. So I decided to get out of the service, and I was out here in California one time. The weather was nice. I figured I'd try it. And I got out here, and I started looking for a job. I had to change professions. The problem was I didn't know how to do anything else. The other thing that was a concern is I wanted to make some money. Now, I started looking through the newspaper, and I pulled out the want ads, and I started, probably like most of you, I started at the A's and worked my way through. I needed a job that offered training. Now, the problem was in the A's, accounting, I didn't see any ads in there that says accountant needed, no experience necessary, we train. Couldn't find anything in that. B's, barbers, no experience necessary. I got all the way through this, finally got to the S's. And one thing I noticed about the selling section, and you may have noticed the same thing, a lot of positions offered training. And almost all of them in there talked about making a lot of money. In fact, I think if we look at the selling section, isn't that where the highest paying jobs are in the newspaper? Well, those caught my eye, and I started looking for jobs that offered training. I looked for jobs that looked like they were going to pay good wages. Now, the first job I applied for was not in the car business. I went down to Farmers Insurance and applied for a job. They gave me a real long interview, an hour plus. They had me take one of those personality profile tests. And then they said, come back tomorrow, we'll go over your test results, and then we'll give you a second interview. And I'm thinking, geez, this is going to be hard getting a job in the highest paying profession in the country. And I got back in the car, and I pulled out my newspaper, and I had another ad circle. This one was for a car dealer. Now, I was reading the ad, and it read almost the same as Farmers Insurance. It said, no experience necessary, we train, highest commissions in town, build a future. Now, the car ad also talked about flexible hours, and it threw in that other word, demo. Now, I had no idea what a demo was. So I called the dealership to see if the job was still available, and I said, and by the way, what's this demo thing? And the guy that answered said, well, that's a free car. I said, could you hang on to that job for a little bit? I'll be right down. And I raced down there trying to get the job. And I was concerned that I wouldn't be able to get it. Farmers Insurance wasn't offering cars. This car dealership was. And when I got down there were two other people applying for the job, and I started to get a little nervous. And I really shouldn't have been nervous because as I got into the interview, I think I had the 3-question interview. I don't know how long yours was. It wasn't the hour and a half I had at Farmers Insurance. I think they said, have you ever sold cars before? And I said, no, really haven't. I believe they asked, why do you think you can? And I said, well, you know, I'm a good old boy. I always liked cars. And a neighbor one time said I ought to be in sales. And then I believe the third question was, when could you start? And I got hired on the spot, and they hired the other two guys on the spot, too. That should have given me a clue that some other things in the ad might not be the way they sounded. I later found out, as you probably have, that flexible hours meant we had to be flexible. The hours weren't. I found out the training program lasted about as long as the interview. My training program was, there's the new car lot, there's the used car lot. Do you guys have any other questions? Now, I didn't know anything about selling. I didn't know anything about selling cars, and I knew nothing about the systems. I didn't realize I was in a TO system. I didn't realize it was one of those real hard ones. I didn't realize they weren't going to write my name on the board until I sold something. I didn't realize if they paid you hours one time, your history. I didn't know we had so much turnover. Now, we weren't really taught much about selling. The only thing I was taught, if I was taught anything, was about how to negotiate. Our goal was to get somebody in the office with a commitment to purchase. What we did on the lot, we did a lousy job out there. There's no question about it. But we were taught to close sales in that little room in there. The only closing question I was ever taught was, if we can work it out today the way we want to buy it, can we sell you guys a car? The only method I was ever taught to handle an objection. If a customer said, I sure like that car, but, you know, I don't like the color, I was taught to drop the price. Well, Bob, what if we drop the price? Well, Joe, we're going to hold off for a little bit. We really wanted a 5-speed. How about if we cut the price even more? Well, we're not ready today, like I said. How about if we cut the price even more and give you more than your trade's worth? Would you buy it? Everything was, if I could, would you, and let me drop the price. Now, I did good in the car business. It took me about 60 days to become the top salesman. I had a lot of enthusiasm. I remember back when I first started, I gave almost everybody a presentation and a demonstration, but I didn't know any better. And like most of you, I don't know if you had that same group where I worked. We had that little huddle out on the lot. Now, the average person in the huddle, these were nice people, but they sold 6, 8, maybe 10 cars. And as a new person, I think I was a lot like you. I wanted to fit into the group, and new people it's like the group is a big magnet and it attracts everybody. I went to the group for support, especially every time I sold something. I remember somewhere around my first sale or second sale or something like that, I went to the group and said, hey guys, look what I did. Now, from your own experience, I had all this enthusiasm. I was a new guy, giving everybody presentations, demonstrations. When I went up to them and said, hey, look what I did I get positive support or negative support? You're right, I got negative support. I didn't get, whoa, great job. I got, whoa, you got lucky. Now, I was there a couple of weeks, and I made more money on a single Dodge van than I made on my 2-week paycheck in the Army. I went up to the group again. We got vouchers back then. And the voucher had what you made on it. I went up, showed my voucher to the group, and I said, hey, guys, look what I got. Again, I didn't get positive support. I got, you new guys get all the laydowns. Hang in there. You'll be down here with us soon. Now, I gradually learned a little bit about selling, but these guys also took away my enthusiasm. And it wasn't but a couple of weeks into this, 3 weeks, 4 weeks into this, they started chipping away at my enthusiasm. And I can almost remember that this person told me everything I need to know about how to be successful in this business. I believe it was also this group that told me everything I needed to know to justify why I didn't sell a car. Well, it wasn't your fault. It was the market, the weather, the economy. It's Saturday morning. Nobody buys Saturday morning. It's Monday afternoon. We had a reason for every time that we didn't sell something. It made us feel a lot better. But in spite of that, I was still the #1 salesman. And I was #1 for give or take about 5 years. The problem with #1, though, I only was #1 in relation to how good #2 was doing. If #2 only had 7 cars, #1 needed 7.5. If #2 had 14, then I needed 14.5. So I was only that much better than #2. That was my motivation, to be #1. I pulled that off for about 5 years, and I made a lot of money compared to what I was making in the service. And 22, 23 years ago, a couple grand a month was good money. And I had my couple of $2,000 months, but on an average, I wasn't making that kind of money. In fact, my best year, the first 5 years, was about $23,000. Now, my average month was more like $1,500 or $1,600. Somewhere along the line, after doing this for a while, I got me a calculator and did some math. And you may want to get one too. If you're working 16 hours a day and you're making $1,600 a month, This is not a good deal. If you do your math in that calculator, that's less than minimum wage. In fact, that's the equivalent of having two $800 a month jobs, and you can do that anywhere. So I finally realized that for the hours that we spent doing this, this was not a bargain. So I quit. I got tired of this. In fact, my first 5 years, I changed dealerships 4 or 5 times looking for a better place. But I guess I gravitated to the same kind of place that I was already working. 5 years later, I got out of the car business, got tired of it. I got tired of slam dunking people into something they didn't want. I got tired of pushing them over the curb, hoping my voucher was going to clear before the ether wore off. And I got tired of the hours, and I got tired of the money. Other than that, I liked it. When I got out of the car business, I used to watch the pinstriper out there, pinstriping cars. So I opened a pinstriping, side molding sunroof business. I said, if this guy can do it, I can do it. And my first 5 years in this business, my managers had always told me to close sales. They told me to stay off price on the lot. They told me to follow up, told me to prospect, told me to do all these things, but nobody really showed me how to do these, how to organize my time, how to set good career goals, how to go out and have a good day every day. When I opened that pinstriping company, I went down to the bookstore one day to buy a book, an accounting book, a ledger book, so I could keep up with the money that I was going to make. And while I was in there, I walked past the selling section. Now, I was 30-something years old, and I'd never been in a bookstore that I recall. I probably hadn't read a book since 9th or 10th grade. And now, all of a sudden, here's all these books on how to sell, how to close, how to overcome objections, how to stay off price, how to follow up, how to prospect, how to set goals, how to be as successful as you'd like to be. I had no idea there was that kind of information. I'd been in the highest paying profession for 5 years and didn't realize it. I didn't realize there was more that I could learn so that I could be more effective. Kind of cut the story short, the next couple of years I went through about 120 or 30 books, tapes, and seminars on how to sell, how to close, how to overcome objections, how to follow up, prospect, manage my day, set clear goals. I learned how to sell from companies outside the car business. I learned from a lot of real estate people, a lot of insurance people, and then I had to convert their closes, their objection methods into car words. But I like cars. So I got back in the car business. A couple years, I was in 5 years, out a couple years, started selling cars again. When I started again, though, I started with new skills. I actually developed closing skills. I learned how to close a sale. I learned how to lead the customer to the purchase. I learned how to get those minor commitments we talked about. I learned how to control the conversation. I learned to handle their objections. I learned to stay off price. I realized that follow-up and prospecting are our keys to success, so I learned how to do that as well. Got back in the car business. In my first 12 weeks back in the business, I made more money than I made my best year in my first 5 years. My first 7 months back in the business, I made more than I made in 5 years put together. Now, I don't know if that sounds good. Maybe you'd rather work longer to make that money, but I'd like to get it over with as quickly as possible. And I realized that there's 3 things that control my success when I got back in this business: my selling skills, my work habits, and my attitude. My first 5 years, most of selling was left up to me. In fact, this is the only job I've ever had where you're not required to do anything. And I kind of say that lightly. I say it in managers classes, dealer classes, and sales classes. But if you stop and think about it, unfortunately, you're not required to do the things that would make you most successful. It's like even presentations, demonstrations. If we're going to do real life stuff in real life, and in fact, maybe we should define who we're going to count. Have you ever sold a service customer a car before? Came up front, said, boy, that's a nice model. I've got a 2-year-old one of those. They're just changing my oil out there. Have you ever spent some time with them, got them behind the wheel, got them excited, sent them home in a car that afternoon? Of course you have. You've done the same thing with a couple that walked on the lot and said, we're just looking, don't waste your time with us. We're just kicking tires, not going to buy a car for a few months. You've done the same with the kid on the skateboard, got him excited. Dad came down, bought him a truck that afternoon. If we count all the people that you talk to, and I asked the same question in class, out of every 10, how many do you give a good presentation, good demonstration to? In real life. In fact, leave out the word good. Out of every 10, how many do you put behind the wheel, including the service customer who shows an interest, the lookers, the shoppers, the guy with the toothpick in his mouth, and those regular people you talk to? What do you figure? I heard somebody say 2 or 3. Heard somebody say 10 out of 10. In class, we've never run into that. I don't even remember doing that my first 5 years. The average in class comes to about 4 out of 10. Now, there's a funny thing about our customers. 99% of them said they'd like to drive it before they buy it. Most of us wouldn't buy a $500 stereo without seeing how it works first. Most of us wouldn't buy a sofa without sitting in it. And they tell us that they're not going to spend $20,000 for a car without seeing how it works. Now, it may sound crazy, but that's just how they are. Now, if that's true, if 99% of them want to drive the car before they buy it, if you only let 4 people drive it, what did you guarantee that 6 out of every 10 people won't do? You're right. You've guaranteed that these people are not going to buy a car. You wouldn't let them. You didn't give them the presentation and demonstration that every person needs to make a decision to purchase. Well, if we don't change that, I can't show you how to improve your sales. There's some things that you just have to work on. Now, another thing that we're not required to, are you required to follow up where you work? I know all managers in class shake their head yes until I say, you mean they have to follow up all the people or just the 4 that they thought were buyers? Well, yeah, they don't really follow up everybody. We start whittling down at this. We don't have to present and demonstrate. We don't have to follow up and prospect. In fact, most of you don't even have to sell anything to keep your job. All I was taught to do my first 5 years was come up with a list of reasons why I couldn't sell more cars. Well, boss, my back was bothering me. Well, everybody I talked to this month was stuck in their trade. You know, everybody I'm writing up's got bad credit. And all my manager required at the end of the month was a list of reasons, not results. And it's unfortunate. If we were forced to work like we were forced to work in that previous job that we had, gosh, we'd make a lot of money doing this. So we're going to talk about a lot of that too. If we're going to be more successful, we're going to earn this kind of money, we have to avoid the traps that most salespeople fall into. And one of the first books I read was a book by a guy named Zig Ziglar. I don't know if you've ever read C at the Top. Great book. It was a great book for me at least because it was my first book. And he brought out some points that just really hit home. A couple of key points for me personally. He pointed out that almost all the people in life, not just in our business, but in all businesses and all walks of life, almost everybody settles for average. Now, you know, you've heard that 80-20 rule. 20% of the people do 80% of the work. Well, that's true. And we call these 80%ers when we're talking about us in class, but 80% of the people are just average. Now, Ziegler points that out, but he also points out one thing about almost all these people. He said people learn how to justify being average. And I guess that's true. You know, my first 5 years when I sold cars, I'd go home with my little $400 paycheck for 2 weeks' worth of work, and I'd tell my wife, I said, honey, I'm sorry I didn't sell more cars. And then I gave her my list of reasons. But it wasn't my fault. It was the market, the weather, the economy. Let's see, my manager is trying to steal all the trade, so he's not giving me enough of the cars. We don't have the right cars. Finance manager's too slow, plus there was a full moon last week. And I had everybody's name on this list except whose. You're right. Ziegler said, Joe, you forgot one name. You forgot yours. I guess if I'd done that right, I'd have gone home and said, honey, I'm sorry to make any money. I don't prospect. I don't follow up. I screw around most of the day. I really don't know much about handling objections, and I couldn't close the door, much less a sale. But that would have been a little uncomfortable. See, our pride and our ego kicks in there. Keeps us from doing that. Ziegler pointed out that that's what most people do. And if you listen to this group out here on the lot, you go out and stand in that huddle for a little bit, isn't that a justification meeting on why we're not selling cars? It's not about how we can sell more cars. It's not about closing, handling objections, staying off price, follow-up. It's about why we can't do any more than we're doing. And you got to be careful that you don't learn how to sell from the underachievers in sales. Again, I'm not talking about the people, nice people, hard workers. I'm only talking about results here. Another key thing that we have to learn to do if we're going to be very successful in sales is we got to get some training. And I know that's what you're doing now, but we need to talk about the importance of more than just this training, and we're going to talk about how to get the most out of this in just a minute. I was at a dealer convention up in Lake Tahoe one time, and it was a bunch of Chevrolet dealers, and I was on a panel discussion with some other trainers. One of the dealers in the audience raised his hand. He said, I want to ask you guys a question. He said, you're trying to sell us training. He said, but what kind of training do people outside the car business get? Now, that's a fair question. And it made me think about it. And let's look at a couple of serious companies out of the car business. Let's look at Disney. I think everybody's heard of them. And I'm sure we've heard of IBM, both serious companies. Let's look at low-paying jobs and let's look at high-paying jobs in both of these companies. Now, if you took the lowest-paying job at Disneyland, I believe that's that person that stands out there on the lot with that broom in their hand, that little bucket, and they're sweeping dirt in a bucket. They got on white shoes, white belt, kind of like car salesmen used to look 25 years ago. But when we talk about that lowest-paying job, it's minimum wage or less. What kind of training does the lowest-paid person get at a serious company outside the car business? Anybody know? I heard somebody say 2 weeks. It is 2 weeks. It's 2 weeks of training, not somebody flipping on a video and saying, here, watch a video for 2 weeks, but it's 2 weeks of training with an instructor, like we were in a live workshop. And they go over not just how to get dirt in a bucket, obviously, but the Disney philosophy. They give them the equivalent of product knowledge, where everything is in the park, how to treat customers, why it's so important. And then after the 2 weeks of training, for another week, they have a supervisor follow them around the lot out there, making sure they're getting dirt in the bucket correctly and giving good directions around the park. Now they have ongoing training on a regular basis after that, but initial training just for somebody, lowest paying jobs, 3 weeks. IBM. I was sitting next to an IBMer on an airplane one time, and we got to talking about training. This guy was a salesman. He was obviously very successful. We were talking about the training they have at IBM, and I said, well, what kind of training did you get? He said, well, you know, before we even start, first we have to have a degree. He said they prefer a degree in marketing, whatever it is, but any kind of degree will kind of get you the job, but you can't even get the job without a degree in something. He said, and then once you're hired, they send you to 5 weeks of training. You go live at the IBM Center. And he said classes start in the morning at 7, 7:30, and they last till 6 or 7 at night. He said, but in real life, we're up till midnight, 2 o'clock in the morning, because nobody wants to go back from the training class with a low class standing because it affects your career the rest of the time you're with the company. He said, after that, we spend 60 days riding around with the supervisor. We don't talk when we're making a sales call. We listen when we're making a sales call. He said, we watch what they do, and when we get in the car later, we can ask questions and talk about why they did things. Next 30 days, they ride around with us. And then they critique us at the end of the calls, and then we go back for a week's worth of training every 90 days. So low-paying jobs, serious companies, 2 or 3 weeks minimum. High-paying jobs, a lot of training. Now, we've always prided ourselves on, whoa, you can show up with a pen in your pocket and make decent money selling cars. We need to clarify that. You can show up with a pen in your pocket, get no training, and earn average wages selling cars. Without the proper training, you can't make a lot of money. And we're trying to sell these cars, and I just read not too long ago in USA Today that the average car is $20,021. Now, how many of these $20,000 cars would you like to sell? What would make you happy? 15, 20, 30 of them? 20 of these things will make you about $60,000, $70,000 a year, so most people would probably be okay with that. So we'd like to sell 20 of these things. That's about $400,000 a month in gross sales that we need to make. That works out to about $4.8 million a year. And most of us would like to do that with less training than a kid gets sweeping dirt in a bucket at Disneyland. I don't know how practical that sounds to you, but that doesn't sound very realistic to me. We have to learn how to sell, or you don't get to sell too many more than you're selling now. You know, in sales, it's kind of like owning your own business, and you're either going to be a market-driven business or you're going to manage your business to more sales. You can constantly improve your sales year after year. And again, we're going to talk about how to do all that on tape. Again, to get the potential in this business, and the potential, I don't think most of us realize the true potential as far as income earnings or unit-wise. And again, I get to travel around the country. I met, I guess, most units a salesperson sells that I personally met is about 80 cars a month. And I checked, they're not in fleet, they don't get all the house deals, and they're not related to the owner. These people just work. I was in Chicago not too long ago having dinner at a restaurant, and a manager came over that I had met at a previous workshop. And he came over and we were talking, and he said his top salesman sold 142 cars the previous month. And I checked, he wasn't related either. Now, that's more cars than I ever sold or even imagined selling. That's more cars than most of us are going to sell. But I got to convince you somewhere throughout this series that 10 is not the most that can be done. 15 is a little better than 10. 20 is, I mean, that's really starting to get good. But the professionals in our business are in the 75,000 plus range. And you don't get lucky and make 75 grand a year. You get lucky and have a $6 grand month. But to be consistent in sales, which is what this program is about, it's going to require ongoing skills. Now, there's some tools that come with this workshop. You've got a workbook in front of you. We're going to go through this workbook just like you were sitting in a live class with me. We're going to go through this thing page by page. Now, there's a couple things I need you to do in your workbook. When I write a workbook, I also write books, and when I write a workbook, I tend to write a book and leave a few blanks. Now, the blanks that I ask you to fill in are to reinforce a point. The point's real important because I need you to remember it. Now, another thing about workbooks and learning more, if you just sat through this class and you listen, even though you might be interested, how much are you going to get out of this? Anybody know? Anybody ever heard that? I heard somebody say 20%. It's almost 20%. It's about 10%. You can get about 10% of this just listening. If you actually fill in the blanks and take some notes, you can get about 20%. And if I can get you to do your homework after the class is over, if your manager gets you to do the homework, you know, you can get almost 50% of this. I need you to do something else the first time we go through each tape. I need you to not screw around, need you to not talk. I want you to pretend like you're in a live workshop with me. You wouldn't probably throw spitwads at the guy across the table if you were in my workshop, and I'd ask you not to do it in yours. You wouldn't talk, you wouldn't laugh, so please do the same thing there. We have a lot to cover, and we only have a short time to cover it. Review your workbooks. When we're through with it, you'll have a book on how to sell cars. One of the key points that comes with this course, and some of you may already be using our planners, I created a special monthly planner just for this program. One of the things this class is going to be about is about getting you more organized. If we're going to be successful in sales or any other profession, first of all, we've got to be ready for more success, and most of us are not even close to being ready for that. We've got a monthly planner, and we're going to go through that literally page by page, and if I can get you to use this planner, you'll see a definite increase in your sales if you didn't even learn anything about selling, just by going to work more organized and being more effective. In class, we ask salespeople how many hours they work, and on an average, it comes out to about 9 hours a day, on an average. Now, actually, I phrased the question wrong. I said, how long are you there? And most people say 9 hours. Then I rephrased the question and say, of the 9 hours, how many hours are you actually working? Doing something that has to do with selling a car. Then the average comes out to about 3 instead of 9. And that's probably true, most of you, I'm guessing. Now, if you're working 3 hours a day and you're selling 10 cars a month and you're making 30 grand a year, that's really not bad money. Don't misunderstand. That's a great part-time job. Problem is, it's just part-time. Now, if I could get you to work your full shift, if you got a 9-hour shift, if I could get you to work it, this is just a math problem. If you work 9 hours instead of 3 hours, how many cars do you get to sell? It's just 3 times 10, be about 30. How much money would you get to make? And it's just, again, 3 times 30, it'd be about $90,000 a year. Y'all know somebody, heard of somebody making close to this kind of money? A little more than that? I'd bet that they put in a good shift. I'd bet that they don't have time to sit out there in a coffee club. I'll bet that they have a pretty good follow-up program. I'll bet that they're pretty good at treating most people as buyers. I bet they're pretty good at the basics. This planner is to help you get organized. Now, there's several parts of it, and again, we're going to go through it piece by piece in the workbook. And this was created specifically for this class. We want to take that step by step. With any other class that you take, remember when we were in school, when we were kids? How long did it take us, some of you got kids in the first grade, second grade, remember they're learning their ABCs? How long did it take them to learn ABCs? Did they learn it in one little 30-minute video? Did the teacher say, guys, gather around, we're going to talk about ABCs this year. Now, we covered today, okay, today I covered it, here's your homework, see you later, see you in about a year. Next year we'll cover sentences. No, they went through it again on a regular basis, ongoing, practice, drill, and rehearse, so that they get better. The reason you do homework is to help reinforce what you learned that day. You got a homework book with this course. This is not an 8-tape set. This is a training video. To go through this video, it's going to require about 30 days of your time. To complete the video, it's going to require pretty much the rest of your career. There's more information in this tape set than most of us will ever accomplish in our lifetimes. The good news is, if you do it, you're going to make an awful lot of money. Now, I need you to get involved in this program. I need you to listen. I need you to ask questions. Some things you want to do after each section of the class. When we get through a video series, when the tape is over, then it's the time to talk. Then it's the time to pass around the ideas. Then it's the time to ask the question. You can always replay it and go back to a part on the class. At the end of the class each day, you want to always get in the habit of writing down the 3 most important thoughts you got out of that. You only get one shot to do this. When you go to sleep at night, you start forgetting things. We talked about retention before, and whether it's 10%, 20%, or 50%, at the end of the class, or whatever book you're reading, tape you're listening to, at the end of it, does retention go up or down? It goes down sort of like that. You can improve retention by working with materials longer, practice, drill, and rehearse. So talk about these things after class, write down the 3 most important ideas you got out of it. You also want to have an open discussion at the end of every one of these tapes to talk about what we covered. Now, as you move through the training program, this first tape, there's not a lot of homework. There's a little bit of homework. As you move through this training program, when you come back into the next class, and that'll be 2 or 3 days from now probably, when you come back into the next class, we're going to have a little quiz on what we covered in today's class. You're going to have homework after each class, a quiz in the morning. And we're going to treat this just like we would treat any other subject, except we're going to develop the skills that it takes to earn a lot of money selling cars. Now, the first few pages in your workbook, pick up your workbook there and turn to page 5. Page 5 in your workbook, little number, bottom right side of the page. One of the things that I want to do, and we're going to go through this very quickly, And you may want to read and reread these after class. But one of the things I want you to do, I just want to ask you some real common sense questions here before we get started. Page 5, number 1. Except for the people too young to drive or too old to drive anymore, would you agree that 95% of the people in your town own a car? The reason I'm asking these questions is because I'm not from your area. I don't know. If you agree with that, check true. Number 2, if number 1 is true, and everybody in your town drives a car, has got one, or going to get one, doesn't it make everybody in your community a buyer now? Or at least in the near future? Again, if that's true, check true. Number 3, if number 2 is true, since everybody in our community is a buyer, you know, a lot of us have confused ourselves trying to decide if they're buyers. I don't believe that's a question. I believe the only question is when they're going to get it and who's going to sell it to them. Would that be true as well? If those first 3 things are true, those first 3 questions, when we learn how to pre-qualify a customer, aren't we guessing wrong almost every time? Haven't you lost enough sales and enough income up to this point? You know, the one thing you'll not find in any of my training programs is how to qualify somebody. When I say qualify, I'm talking about the dollars and cents stuff. The can they buy and do they want to buy? If they're standing on the lot, you got to assume they're there to buy, and you have to assume they're going to get a car in the very near future. Number 4 on here. If I do a better job of selling, building value, and closing than the salesperson down the street, I can sell some of the people that they would have sold. I know you get a lot of people that are shopping your dealership and the dealership down the street. Doesn't it get down to who does the best job? In fact, if you talk about closing somebody, haven't you ever closed a sale and gotten more money than the customer could have paid down the street, and they knew it and you knew it, and they gave you the extra money? How come they gave you the extra money? Value. And we need to do that with every customer that we talk to. Number 5, if number 4 is true, and if I just do a better job than everybody else and continue to learn more, I can improve my sales now and continue to improve them year after year. If you keep getting better at selling and you keep applying yourself, will you make more money? Of course you will. Number 6, most of my customers bring up price in some form out on the lot before they actually find a car they're willing to take home. I'm assuming that's true. I've never been in a place, never worked in a place, never heard of anybody that didn't ask about the price, trade, down payments, what kind of interest rates and things like that. Number 7, of course price is important, but would you agree that people make their decision to purchase based on the value they feel they receive for the price they have to pay? What that means is, doesn't it get down to be a value decision? No matter how cheap it is, if they don't like it, they're not going to buy it. So it's our job to create the value to make them want it. Number 8, if this really does get down to a value decision, if number 7 is true after my presentation, if I have a customer that objects to the price, the real objection is that I didn't create enough value to justify that price that we were asking for the car. I think that has to be true. Number 9, it'll be tough to earn professional wages if I try to take shortcuts with most people and skip the basic steps of selling. Almost everybody in this profession is out there pre-qualifying everybody. I asked you before, out of every 10, how many did you give a presentation to? If you said 3 or 4, that means you skipped the steps of selling with 6 or 7 out of 10. You can't make a lot of money skipping steps. Number 10, if I don't close the sale and the customer leaves without buying, if I follow up effectively, there's a pretty good chance they'll come back in and buy the car from me. If you do your follow-up with all the people who leave without buying, pretty good chance they'll come back in and buy. Of course. Number 11, if I didn't close and I don't follow up, unfortunately, statistics prove the customer will buy their car from a salesperson down the street. I don't know if you knew that. If you don't sell them, they buy somewhere else. And that money that you could have made in commission, you don't get. The salesperson down the street gets it. Number 12, if I don't follow up every working prospect, when my customers buy their car down the street, the other salesperson will not spiff me for the referral. Unless you guys got this little referral program going around town, I've never worked in a place that did that. Number 13, if I consistently follow up all my working prospects and sold customers, I'll also consistently sell more vehicles year after year. Follow-up is your long-term success method. It's the thing that will guarantee your long-term success and future sales. Number 14, a lot of us confuse experience with how long it takes to do things. If experience was the key to getting better at selling and closing, then somebody who started selling 10 cars a month 10 years ago should now 10 years later be at what, 25, 30 cars? But they usually aren't, are they? Number 15, a well-trained salesperson will almost always sell more cars than a salesperson with no real training. And if I keep learning more, I'll keep earning more. True? Number 16, here's what the problem is. Most salespeople only bother to learn how to be average in sales. And average is 10 cars a month and $30,000 a year. but they all seem to learn how to blame being average on something and somebody else. Number 17 is the biggest question on the page, and this is a personal choice that you have to make. And we're going to show you how to do it, but you have to make a conscious decision. Number 17, I'll become a professional in sales and make a lot of money. Or number 17, I'll just stay average and blame everybody and everything else. Again, that's a personal choice. Real quick on page 6, we talk about potential in this business. You really have no limits. Most people don't realize the potential that's here. And I'm sure your eye went to the bottom of the page, so we'll talk about that first. It says units per month and income per year. These lines from left to right are pretty much going to line up. If you sell about 10 cars a month, you'll probably earn somewhere in that $25,000 to $35,000 range. You get up in the 25 range, you should be in the $70,000, $80,000 range, give or take. And when you get up in that 50, 60 range, you're making some serious, serious money in this business. Now, most of us would like to be over there, but most of us haven't gone to the trouble that it takes to get higher up that ladder. In fact, at the top of the page, to rate yourself in sales, and you have to constantly rate yourself or you can't improve. To rate yourself in sales, should we, A, rate ourselves by how much we know, B, by how hard we try, C, our experience level, D, how nice we are, E, how many hours we put in, or the results that we achieve? The only way you can get better in sales is by improving your selling activities, your attitude, and your skills. That's going to be reflected in your results. And the results are the only guideline that we have to determine what we're doing in sales. Nice people, a lot of nice people in sales. Don't sell anything, family starving, but nice people. A lot of hard workers come to work and confuse hard work and good intentions with good, clear goals. We want to clear up how to do this. In this class, we're going to cover, first thing we're going to talk about in the next tape, we're going to talk about the secrets to success. If you ask me what 3 or 4 things you could do to be more successful, I'll spell them out for you. There's 4 key areas that you need to work on. We're also going to talk about getting you more organized. An organized person will get more done in a day than a disorganized person. Now, I understand there's some resistance from disorganized people to getting organized, but we're going to work you through this monthly planner, and we're going to keep it so simple it won't make sense not to do it. And you'll be amazed what you can get done in a day. We're also going to talk to you about goal setting. We didn't have goal-setting classes at early high school when I grew up. I don't recall having goal-setting classes in the service, and at any of the dealerships I've ever worked at, they've never talked to me about goals. Now, we all had goal-setting sessions. You know, that little monthly highball session, you go around the room and everybody highballs each other on what you can do for the month? That's not goal-setting. If anything, that's very negative. It's very detrimental. I want to show you how to take goals and use them to plan your career step by step. And we're going to keep this real simple. I've read 3 or 4 books on goal setting and listened to 2 or 3 tape sets. I'm going to squeeze this into about 30 minutes on a video. But I can make it so simple that you'll know how to do it and you'll be able to use goals to help you get where you want to be. We're going to talk about some tips on working with people. There's some things that you just need to know about people in sales. You know, most of us were farmers, bartenders, waitresses, accountants, teachers. We were something else, and then we became a salesperson in the car business. You got to understand people. And that doesn't come to you in a dream one night. Whoa, wake up one morning. Oh, now I know about people. So I want to give you some tips on that. We're going to cover the basics, but we're going to call these Joe's Basics. And we're going to break this down, the steps of selling, we're going to break them into 2 parts. The reason I call them Joe's Basics, because there's nothing in there about price. I'm going to show you how to investigate thoroughly to find the right car that people should be on without ever asking them a dollar figure. And everybody says, well, why don't you want to ask the dollar figures? Because the negotiation starts as soon as somebody blurts out a figure. And as soon as the customer has a figure, there's a 96% chance they're going to go shop that figure. So it's bad luck all the way around. Besides that, we said before in that little questionnaire that people make a decision based on value, not on price. We don't build value by talking price. And in real life, we lower the value by talking about the price. So we're going to cover the basics. There's 2 steps of the basics, the pre-presentation steps and the presentation steps. So we're going to cover both steps of those. We're going to give you the tools that you need to literally double your sales and double your income. And I'll even show you how with goals, I'll even give you a plan on how you can do that. A lot of information to cover in a class. Please take it seriously. When the class is over, I don't know if your manager is going to have you do your homework now or do it between now and the next workshop. Please take this serious, take good notes, keep an open mind, and I'll see you on the next program.